Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for having me today. Alan, I hope this answers some of your questions and puts you at a bit of ease. And thank you also to Alan for introducing the concept of the fourth industrial revolution. So the challenge that Jericho faces, and I'm going to couch this in terms of Jericho being an Air Force program, couching it in terms of looking at some Air Force problems, but you'll get the gist, and I'll lead with it up front that this is about joint capability and how air power contributes to that. Our challenges have been discussed during earlier presentations today, specifically the human nature of warfare. Alan has again touched on the technological aspects of air power and what it is that we do. Specifically, what Jericho is trying to achieve is changing the culture of our people to start rethinking the way they conceive air power, the way that they conceive how we can win in the air. We do that now in the fourth industrial revolution, seeking transient advantage. Where previously, in the Cold War, for example, a capability would be developed, a competitor would develop a countermeasure, a countermeasure would be developed, so on and so forth. Each taking several years to a decade to achieve. Really fitting into Alan's point there about the military-industrial complex and how they made money and how they survived and how we did business. With new technology, with the advent of the interconnectedness of data, we won't have that luxury of time. We need to be thinking differently. We need to be thinking about every advantage that we can find, that we can exploit, and that we can absolutely make use of. That's where Jericho is aiming to get the culture of our current Air Force. Firstly, though, I want to talk about the concept of fifth generation. It's been used as a phrase a number of times today. When I first came into Jericho at the beginning of the year, all of our documentation talks about fifth generation. Nothing really describes what that is. To me, as I read it, it was always the answer. Fifth generation will solve it. And because we treat it as the answer, when you talk about fifth generation platforms, the F-35 for example, it became the answer. It's okay, you know, the Royal Australian Air Force is fifth generation, we've got the F-35 now, particularly when they arrived in country. But actually, I think that's just a mechanism. The real question is, how does the joint force prevail in this new complex environment of the fourth industrial revolution? And that's what I think the answer is. Getting the right information to the right people, the decision makers at any level in our organisation across the joint force. I use those distinctions very carefully, so it's not just about the commander at JOC, the commander in the Air Operations Centre, a squadron commander, a flight commander leading a four-ship of Super Hornets. It could be, to prevail in the future conflicts or future competition, decision makers in our headquarters, at Air Force headquarters, at Headquarters Air Command. It's about moving information around at the speed of relevance. Last month, Air Vice Marshal Kath Roberts, our Head of Air Force Capability, spoke at the Defence and Industry Conference. These are some of the key points of her speech, and I particularly draw your attention to the pieces I've listed in blue. These are enduring themes, I guess, of the transition between third industrial revolution, fourth industrial revolution, air power. It's about people. Most importantly, it's about disruptive, transformative innovation. It is about joint. We need to be able to move at speed and with scale. We heard about augmenting our intelligence. That's the title of the EDGE strategy that Chief of Air Force released at this year's Avalon Air Show. It's about early investment. I think it was Jack touched on it today with the varying levels of artificial intelligence that will be employed throughout our organisation, and it won't be just an enterprise level, it will be many. There is a moral responsibility to make sure that we are building algorithms that ethical and that are traceable, auditable. We need to know if we progress down the path of automation, that the automated tools that we're building are doing the right thing. And we've heard a couple of times today it's about winning without fighting. And I'll talk more about that as we go through. Alan touched on this just a second ago, innovation versus disruption. Innovation, we all hear about innovation. Innovation is about doing things that we currently do better. And there's a way of doing things. Disruption is changing ultimately the way we currently do things. I use, and there's a couple of really good international examples. Kodak is a great one. And you use the evolution of the camera across the top there. But Kodak was utterly disrupted by the advent of digital cameras. It wasn't that they weren't ready for it. They had produced their own digital cameras very early on in that realm, but they built their business model around selling film and processing film, which clearly went away for the majority of us. There's still some niche people that hang on to film SLRs, bless them, but for the majority, Kodak went out of business because of that. I think it was Economic Champion mentioned about not being the one to be disrupted. Kodak was the one that was disrupted in this case. And there's another really good example, I won't go into too much, but World Book Encyclopedia or Encyclopedia Britannica, any of those, where people of my vintage grew up with a house that had a shelf stacked with the A to Zs of these encyclopedia that got us through school and possibly university. That went away with the advent of the internet and Microsoft and Carter and eventually into Google. Don't be disrupted. So, how is Air Force approaching this? And I hope this is starting to answer Alan's question now. There is a plan, and it's about the adoption model of new technology. Just quick show of hands here, and I'm looking around the room, there's people old, as old as me. The iPhone came out in about 2006, 2007. Quick show of hands, who were the first to go out and get it, that year that it came out? Looking around, a few hands coming up. That's about the percentage of early adopters relevant for this room. A bunch of folks though tend to sit back and wait just to see, yeah, I sort of get it, but you know, my old Nokia 31, whatever it was, plus my digital phone, digital camera that I have to lug around with me, plus my so my Refidex that we probably all used to Melways, for those Victorians, used to drive around the car with. You've probably all been to Sydney with a taxi driver who had it on the steering wheel as they're driving you to your destination. You always just think, yeah, geez, wouldn't it be great if I just had one tool that did all of those things? The tool came along, and yet most of us still weren't convinced straight away. And that's sort of the norm. So, Plan Jericho on the left here, we think, for example, using the analogy I just gave you, is the Apple, if you like, of the phone evolution. Coming up with new ideas, seeking new ways of doing business, actively seeking out disruptive, alternative ways of delivering capability that we're already going after, or that we might not even know we need. But we need to get that into market, into Air Force. We'll do that through our program Edgy Air Force predominantly, which started last month. It's about to have its second iteration in Wagga next month, where we go out and look for the Air Force early adopters. I've seen two up the back there. You would be the people that I would be targeting through our programs to come in and start looking at and playing with our technology. We believe that you learn by doing. It's no sense as an organisation talking about artificial intelligence, for example, and not having some artificial intelligence in your office, in your workplace, for people to start becoming used to it. Normalising the capabilities. We are building later this year a facility in Canberra where we will seek to bring our technology into our workplace. Bring early adopters in, to play with that technology, normalise it in their workplace. They start playing with it, they will start changing how they do their current job. If they start changing how they do their current job, how they think about their current job, they will go back to their workplace and start changing what they do at their current job. And over a short period of time, we believe that they'll start changing why they're doing their job. And I'll talk about a couple of examples of that in due course. Once we start changing enough people's minds about what this technology looks like, or developing social proof, hitting a tipping point, statistically I believe that's about 27% of the population, actually believing that, you know what, the new iPhone isn't such a bad tool after all, you get acceptance and you bring in the early and late majorities. Our view is that if we can prove or disprove new technology's application to future Air Force, that we then have an ability to pitch that to our senior leadership as alternative visions for current capability planning. And I'll talk more about that in future slides. So here's a disruptive concept that the US Air Force is looking at. From a report written in May of this year, and I'll just talk really about the three key themes, but effectively it's about turning an Air Force into an app store. It's talking about how you use data at speed and cycle. So it's changing processes, changing culture inside of your organisations. Not necessarily the users, there's policy to change as well. Finding digital talent. Who are the coders in our organisation? Who are the people, typically because we don't have this sort of culture or these sorts of tools in our Air Force right now, who are the people who go home at night and play on their computer, or white hat hackers, play a range of different video games enabled by artificial intelligence, just for fun. We need to find them and bring them to bear. And we need to bring them to bear, change our processes, and be able to update them at the speed of relevance. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go. Right, so inside of Jericho, we've got right now in our R1 level 6 office space a Jericho experimental network that expands across the country at the moment. We have connected to that network EO cameras. We have monitoring a commercial UAS detection system, which is currently, as of today, rolling out to our 4th military base in Australia. We monitor unclassified air traffic control, ADS-B feeds, and we have a very basic unclassified electronic warfare sensor feeding into a network into our office. We've worked on the compute layer. One of our lines of effort is a combat cloud, a network. At the moment, we have just what I would call a very basic network. In November of this year, we, in conjunction with CIO Group and Telstra, are expanding that to a 4G cloud. In November of next year, that will become a 5G combat cloud with more resilience and looking to our ability to mesh with other networks. But regardless, that's our plan, and we're doing that with CIO Group. We're pathfinding with CIO Group for Joint Project 2047, which is the defence backbone. But what if we were to scale, so assuming we've got the compute layer down because that comes with the systems, we've built the network, or we're building the network. What if we were to scale then the algorithm? We're looking to build algorithms with our data practitioners that we're seeking to effectively stitch these different sensor sources together into a comprehensive, coherent picture. Once we do that in our experimental network, we're seeking to prototype the next level. I've written Project Air 6500 up there, which is our persistent air and space defence capability project. Really, what I mean by that is data sets that are parametric in nature. So what if we were to be able to stitch together our radar information, our ground-based space sensors, our space telescope, our space radar, aircraft data, ship data, satellite data, with an algorithm that treated that information like big data. We all have our phones probably in our pockets. Why, if I can walk through a shopping centre anywhere in the world, will my phone and Google know exactly where I am and be able to start pitching me relevant information about where I am and what it thinks I like to buy? Why can't we apply the same logic to our sensor data? This is where Jericho is going to try to provide some relevance to future fighting. If we can do it with parametric data, why can't we scale it up now to imagery, full motion video, still imagery, logistics information, Blue Force tracking information, media, open source data, logistics, national and military. What do our road networks look like? What do our rail networks look like? What's our capacity right now to move something from A to B? The compute layer is relatively taken care of. We're developing edge processing to reduce the data load across the network layer, which we're also building at the moment. What if we were to scale the algorithms to scrape that data so that individual decision makers at different levels can make sense of that information and make the right decision at the speed of relevance? That's what we're looking for. Someone, I think Jack used the term Internet of military things this morning, defence things, same thing. What we need to work on is, and this is still new science, but we're working with our academic partners to achieve some of this semantic fusion. What does it mean to stitch parametric data seamlessly with an image? So that the decision maker that needs to know what that contact is can see that actually I've got some form of image that says that's a fighter of some type, or a maritime patrol aircraft, or a fishing boat, or a truck going from A to B. And we're also getting after causal inference, which is again hard. Most artificial intelligence looks at post-processed information. What have I just seen, and that's the what? What's the so what now what? We're looking to get after causal inference, which looks at what happened but why. Because if we understand why, we can then start winning without fighting. Joe, I think, used Sun Tzu earlier. That's getting into the Sun Tzu territory. So, noting the time, Gartner is an online analysis organisation. They've used a coined a phrase, think me, see me, know me, be me. Again, coming back to phones of the future, and it wasn't that long ago, people were predicting that, for example, and I'll use a male protagonist here, husband, been at work all day, driving home, forgotten it's their wedding anniversary. Looking around the room, seen some head nods, it's probably happened once or twice. Your phone knows your calendar, knows you've been busy, back-to-back meetings, recognises that you haven't used it to make contact with any organisation to try to remedy the predicament you find yourself in driving home. Makes a phone call on your behalf to a florist on the drive home, changes your navigation because you're plugged in through Android Auto, for example, takes you via the florist, tells you what it's done. It's already paid for it because you've given the phone your credit card information. All you need to do is follow your navigation prompts. Google will tell you to get out of the car, go and pick up the flowers, jump back in the car, drive home. It's saved the day in that one particular situation. Think me, see me, know me, be me. Using artificial intelligence to make military decisions is obviously a next step along. Mad Scientist blog, very quickly, talks about the guy behind the guy. How do we turn the Google Assistant into something really useful in a military sense? It uses a movie analogy, the movie Swingers. The Mike to Trent. Mike is the guy who knows how to get things done for Trent. The Mad Scientist blog goes on to make another analogy, which is Napoleon's chief of staff from the late 1700s to the early 1800s. Lists a bunch of traits on the left, that being the human factors that humans are good at. On the right, what AI can do for you. Why in the future, if I can have my Google Assistant direct me the way it can currently direct me, can't I start leveraging some of that power in a military sense? So that if I'm controlling an air war, I can't say, hey Alexa, military Alexa, keep an eye on that airspace out there. I suspect there's going to be some competitors, maritime patrol aircraft that might come out to have a look at some activity that we're doing. Let me know if that happens. And then you can step away and the AI may take care of that for you. These are the future concepts that we're trying to explore. The Marvel Universe. Jarvis, Karen in Spider-Man's suit, same sort of concept, more modern scenario. So I'm looking around the younger faces here, you should all get that. Okay, how's Jericho doing this? Again, Alan, coming to your point. We recognise that this is a cultural change. Bear with me, we're moving left to right. We know that we need to develop agile thinking, different ways of thinking inside of our people. We're doing that through our Inspire activities, our Edgy Air Force activities. We know we need to get after high-end science. We're doing that through DST. We're doing that through partnerships with academic institutions around the country. We're doing that with industry. Finding disruptive and alternative ways of thinking about how we do our current business and how we should look to future projects. Accelerating how we can bring some of those in, and I talked about the facility in Canberra that we're building so that we can bring data practitioners and like-minded people with the technology together to provide an environment where we can test this thing, learn by doing, normalise to a degree what this looks like so we can inspire 27% of the organisation that it's a good idea to pursue. We'll take questions afterwards. I've just put this slide up as a backup to answer a point I think Economical Champion raised, which is about new ways of thinking into the future. And I won't belabour this, but on the left, the bits I've highlighted, or the words that I've highlighted in green there, are the ones that have come up the list from the right in 2015. The ones that are in comes up a bit red or orange, they're the ones that have gone down the list. But you get the gist of how we need to think a bit differently into the future. There's more green than red up there. Thanks for listening. I hope that gives you a little bit of faith in what Jericho might be looking to achieve.